welcome to session 2, the best one. I'm kidding, no offense. There's all 3 sessions are great. My name is Hillary Matchett, General Partner, Quantum Coast Capital. Pleasure to see you all here today. Thank you for taking the time. For those of you who know me, good to see you again. For those of you who don't, just a few words about myself. I've spent about 30 years in corporate America. 2 decades of that was with JP Morgan, from equity research and asset management, portfolio management to banking. The last 10 years has been working alongside CEOs, entrepreneurs, innovators, and educators as a private investor. And I have teamed up with Matt to form Quantum Coast Capital to leverage all the things that you just heard in session 1. But on top of that, I'm also a parent of 2 boys, just like Paul, except I don't get to talk about socks. I get to talk about paying attention. And I'm forever screaming, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Well, I'm thrilled because you're all here to pay attention. You're paying attention as educators, community leaders, Americans, investors. All of you wear all of these hats, some of them in different sequence, but we should all pay attention to what quantum is bringing to the community, what it's bringing to our nation, and in particular, national security, encryption, et cetera. So I have the distinct honor of having some successful in-the-weeds quantum experts talking to us about their businesses. And I am going to ask them each to do about a 2-minute introduction on their backgrounds and then get into a Q&A session and have some fun. So Amanda, may I start with you?
Yeah, please. Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Stein. I'm the CEO of a company called Quantum Catalyzer based out of the Washington, D.C. area. So we are focused on research and development in quantum sensing. And so we work with partners from industry and government to work on some of the hardest problems in quantum sensing. We also identify some large markets where we think quantum sensing can have impact, and we try to commercialize technology and therefore spin out companies. My background's a little unique. I started my career on Capitol Hill, though I'm originally from North Miami Beach area. So thank you, Matt and Hillary, for bringing me down here today. And moving from Capitol Hill, I worked in academia at the University of Maryland for over 10 years, which is where I met our founder, Ron Walsworth, who is one of the leaders in quantum sensing, and specifically something called NV Diamond quantum sensing, which I'll be happy to talk about after. But really excited to be here and really looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lamont Silves. I'm head of government for IonQ. We're a publicly traded quantum computing company. We're on the New York Stock Exchange, went public in November of 2021. In terms of background, I've been involved with quantum ventures for about 8 years. I came at it from a national security background, prior military, and then worked in government, and got involved with quantum computing to kind of get at some really tough, challenging national security problems, because there are things that one can do with quantum computers that you really can't do efficiently with classical computers at this point. And that every year that's changing. The breadth of problems that we can address grows. And so we're able to tackle more and more issues. And thanks to Paul Steimers and what the Quantum Industry Coalition is doing, we're able to have some really productive conversations with key stakeholders in government and industry about where we think this needs to go next. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that today.
Great, thank you. Corey?
Yeah, hi, Corey McClellan with Cubitech. We're a quantum networking company, and if you saw the recent announcement, IonQ is actually in the process of purchasing us. So it's probably next week or sometime in the next 6 months, I'll have an IonQ hat on as opposed to Cubitech. Our focus and one of the powers of us coming together as 2 companies, one compute and one networking, is the fact that it's unique today in the marketplace. And it brings a power that very few companies have addressed yet. So we'll be able to fit into spaces that a lot of the compute companies can't. Cubitech is 12 years old. I came out with the company about 6 years ago. My background is computer science and cybersecurity. And I was running a cybersecurity research and development program for the state of California utilities. We were looking for an out-of-the-box networking, quantum, not a quantum, but a protected network type of solution for SCADA communications. We ran across Cubitech. They use quantum entanglement. We use quantum entanglement as our unique asset in the field, and Paul described that quite well. I certainly can't. The Nobel Prize winner for physics in 2022 won it for quantum entanglement, and he will admit he still doesn't understand it. So, so don't worry if you're kind of on the edge. But the whole idea is that we want to get out more. The quantum industry is just expanding at this point, and it's really exciting to be in this space.
Tom?
My name is Tom Dakich. I've been a practicing attorney for about 40 years. Staying on the IonQ thing, earlier this year, you guys got to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange, and you were nice enough to let me stand on the stage while you guys were doing it. So my partner Ryan and I own a company called Quantum Corridor, and we believe that distributed networks are what's going to actually make these computers much more efficient and work through it. We also have a concept in the way we're approaching things, which is a little different. So everybody in the room has probably put some money someplace into data centers in some way, shape, or form, or at least they touch your purpose. So about 10 years ago, I attempted to change the data center industry in Chicago. I'm from Indiana. I grew up in Northwest Indiana and in Indiana and Chicago and all that. But we came up with this theory that we could take public assets in Chicago and turn it into a data center. Well, we crashed and burned in Chicago, but we went over the line into Indiana and went well. And so we opened up a data center and passed some legislation. And it was a big part of public-private partnerships with Indiana that made it work ahead. This isn't an advertisement for Indiana, but what I will tell you is that I believe the data center industry is going to rapidly change. The reason why data centers for the last 10 years or whatever have been so important is because the management and the storage of the data requires all that space. It requires a house that's going to make it is connected and with cooling and all the 5 elements that you need in order for a data center. I think that's all going to change very rapidly. I think we're going to end up with distributed networks. We're going to end up with what I call quantum commercialization centers that are going to use the quantum internet, that are going to be tying 2 buildings together that are not next to each other, but they may be 50 miles apart, they may be 500 miles apart. And those buildings are going to act like data centers. They have data center elements to it, but they're not going to be data centers because there's going to be elements of entanglement and quantum involved in those.
Excellent. So Amanda, question for you first. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, this is a very broad question, but how does quantum integrate with national security efforts?
That's a great question, because as we have a big diversity on this panel between sensing, actual computing, and networking, it can be integrated in national security in all those 3 ways. So starting with what we're doing with quantum sensing, and we work very closely with a lot of entities in the US government, there's something called navigation and position and timing. Oftentimes soldiers go into places where there's no GPS. So quantum sensing is a way that can allow for what we call GPS denied navigation to our soldiers to protect the US military in spaces where they weren't protected before. Networking and post-quantum cryptography is talked about quite a bit, and putting those 2 together, making our networks more secure and protecting against future quantum computers, more adversarial attacks is another way how we're going to protect. And then, of course, making our quantum computing systems robust so that the US is the leader in the world in quantum computing will just make it even better within the national security space.
Excellent, thank you. Tom, you just referenced public-private partnerships. How are you leveraging those private-public partnerships in your space, and how can you apply that towards other regions?
So if we talked about creating a quantum network here, creating a quantum environment here. It starts with local support. First of all, you have to make permitting easy. It has to be easy. If it's not, they'll go someplace else. Secondly, there has to be tax incentives. They don't have to be robust. They just have to exist. Grants are nice, but that's not as important as making it such that little tricky things that really matter, like exemption from sales tax, those sorts of things are important, a part of public-private partnerships. What you talked about the Lambda network, which is a great network. Again, I keep coming back to Indiana, which is not what I wanted to do, but so Indiana has something called the ILITE system, which is very similar. Every university in Indiana is tied together. So what we're doing is we're taking entanglement nodes and we're going to place a half a dozen or so entanglement nodes around the state of Indiana, which the state's going to, don't watch this, pay for this. They don't know that yet. But that's going to happen. And then the whole network, the whole ILITE system is going to be tied together with the compute possibilities and the quantum capabilities that are incumbent in that. So what happens is the university kids at those schools can do things that other kids can't do, which then makes them maybe some kids that weren't going to go there come there, and that's an example of that. As investors, my 2 cents to you is the government needs to have, this is infrastructure. I mean, if you look at it as anything other than infrastructure, then good for you, but I think you're missing the boat. You have to look at quantum and the networking that's going on as infrastructure. So if you take the government's money, whatever the government is, it might be a mayor, it might be senators, whatever, but whatever, that money has to go in first, and you guys need to come in afterwards. And your investment can be some more substantial to it, but the investment from in my opinion, again, this is, take it for what it's worth, but your money coming in after the government's hypercharges your money, makes you a little bit more secure, de-risks it slightly, and makes it such that you have more control over where the network's going to go. Putting up one building, I don't know if anybody's going to do this, I apologize if I'm insulting you, but putting up one building that's going to have a computer in it, it's going to be tied by normal fiber back to the POP that's down the street, to me is short-sighted. Getting the government to support you in terms of multiple buildings where you can get more out there. It doesn't have to be here. It can be in Miami. You can go to Tampa for heaven's sake. But being part of the state network that already exists is the government using the government money that's already in the networking and to your advantage as an investor.
All right, thank you. Corey, question. International competition. What does that look like, and what are the opportunities for the United States?
So there's a lot of competition right now. Obviously, we're focused on China quite a bit just because of the power and the amount of money that they're putting in. I remember a time before the internet, some of you may not be old enough to remember that, but I do. There is incredible power in the internet. And when the quantum-enabled internet comes along, it's going to blow away the internet era. If we think 10 years in advance and there's a secret weapon and it can turn off airplanes in the sky and drop them without any kinetic involvement. That weapon is a quantum computer running strong AI across a free space quantum network. And that is something that's possible in the future. So if you think of that kind of power that the United States has to be at the forefront of, and whoever gets there first, whatever country gets there first, will be, in charge basically of the world economics and national security. So that's the kind of focus that we have, and how important it is. Quantum networking is the major focus of that because it's the critical infrastructure. It will tie quantum computers together. It will tie the quantum-enabled internet of the future together.
You mentioned China. Can you quantify how much they're spending and how much we're
There's
spending?
a lot of different estimates on that. Yeah.
Best guess.
Well, 15 billion is what I've heard over the last 5 to 6 years. They have a 3,000 kilometer quantum network that they've developed already that has quantum key distribution. It's daisy-chained from Beijing down to Shanghai, and then it's starting to filter all over. They've done a satellite shot already with the Messiah satellite, doing free space communications. So they've done a lot of work on quantum already.
So Lamont, that tees up then what initiatives and procedures and policies do we need to be leaning in on so that we can enhance our leadership, or perhaps we don't have leadership right now in the quantum space?
So it's a good question. And one of the things that I tell people on the Hill when we go up to the Hill to do briefings is there's a lot of really great tech development happening in America. We're good at that, right? We know we are. But there's probably only 3 that directly bear on national security in such a critical way. One is hypersonics. the other is AI, and the third is quantum technologies. Arguably, you could be second in the first two and catch up, because we are no doubt second or third in hypersonics today. But if you're second, as someone was saying earlier, in quantum computing, for example, you're last. There's no prize for second place in quantum computing, because it's such a strategic national technology. That's why the Chinese are investing 10x what the US government is investing in quantum. They're doing it because not every investment's going to pay off. We know that, right? If you've spent time in private equity or venture capital, you understand that not every investment's going to pay off. We need to understand that not every government investment in advanced technologies is going to pay off either. But it's important because it's all part of the path of establishing and maintaining US leadership in a critical technology. That's that, full stop, that's it. I would also say that, for folks who are looking at the policy around quantum, it's very important that we not make the US a quantum island. The US needs to collaborate with our friends and allies and partners around the world for a couple of reasons. One, we leverage the investment dollars that are being made in other places and gain access to that technology and talent. That's a big one. Because as I have said on the Hill before, if you wall this off and make quantum technology an ITAR item, you'd better be prepared to spend a lot more money than you're spending today on quantum, because you'll have to. We won't have access to it. The other thing I would say toward that end is we've talked about the importance of the technology evolving beyond the point where you need a quantum physicist. As a practical matter, our company, we have about 400 people. 100 or so have PhDs. 3/4 of our staff have at least a graduate degree or postgraduate work, largely in very deeply technical fields. But as we move forward, we're developing technology for the Air Force, for example, that will allow an Air Force sergeant to maintain a quantum computer, where today you might need someone with at least a master's degree in physics. Similarly, we want Army sergeants to be able to write applications for quantum computers. Our current applications team has 17 PhDs. But as the technology goes forward and evolves, and it's happening very quickly, we're not talking, the 10-year horizon that everyone uses with respect to quantum, that doesn't apply to some of these developments that I'm talking about. So as we go forward, it's very important for the US to continue to maintain the leadership role that we have in quantum computing. That is not true of all quantum technologies. As we were talking about with quantum communications, arguably the Chinese already have a lead role in that and are in front of the US.
So we need to pay attention.
Can I supplement that?
Yes, you may. Yeah.
So the French government, there's an annual conference. There's a couple of them. We just left one yesterday, literally yesterday, one in Silicon Valley. But there's one in Paris, and the French government makes no bones about the fact that they are not a superpower anymore. They literally, I don't know if anybody was at Q2B Paris earlier this year, but the Prime Minister of Paris stood on stage and said, we're not a superpower anymore, but we intend to do everything we possibly can. We're going to put every dime we have into a certain company within France to make us a superpower. And that's how we're going to get back to being respected by the world, by putting all of our resources as a country behind winning this war. That says something about what's going on. You can make jokes about France, but that's pretty good philosophy.
Interesting. Corey, I'm going to ask another question of you, if you don't mind. So with the inevitability of quantum computing to break traditional encryption, what can we do to get ourselves into a post-quantum safe spot?
It's a really technical and difficult question. And Lamont may be better ready to answer this question, but I'll give it a go. So there are, post-quantum cryptography is one focus of the US right now, focused on the NIST standards that are coming out and the couple of different algorithms that have made it through the wicket. In my view, we don't know if those are going to work or not until we have a quantum computer that can actually break them or show that they do work. We think it's going to be more of a hybrid solution where it's going to be PQC and something like a quantum entangled key distribution system, which is different than just QKD. Quantum entanglement gives security levels that current QKD does not give. We also have the NSA that's very strongly against quantum key distribution right now, whereas the rest of the world is embracing it. The EU is doing a continent-wide quantum key distribution system, which will include satellites to do long haul. And then China is also doing it on a nationwide basis. So we do have some catch up there. But to answer your question, I think it'll be a hybrid solution in the future.
And you said NIST standards. Lamont, can you tell us what the latest NIS standards are?
Actually, I can't.
You can't? Oh, all right.
I don't track it. What I would add to what Corey was saying, though, I think it's important to sketch out what the risk looks like of this, right? Because we hear a lot of this talk about QKD and post-cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, and what that means. Let's look at the implications of that. If it were possible, and it will be, to your point, if it were possible to crack current encryption with a quantum computer, which is what the Chinese are driving at hard, what it means is when you launch a ballistic missile, it may come back on you because your communications with that rocket are not secure. So that's no longer secure. When you launch aircraft and drone swarms at an enemy, they may also come back at you or just fall out of the sky because that's also no longer secure. It also has implications in finance. If you were able to adjust the clocks in the world's financial system by just a few milliseconds, you would shut down the entire global financial system. ATMs wouldn't work, SWIFT transactions wouldn't work. You could bring the entire thing to its knees. You couldn't fly aircraft, any aircraft, not just military. You couldn't fly civilian aircraft. One could look at the Enigma machine. Everyone's familiar, I think, with the Enigma machine and what was done there. Think of the Enigma machine on a global scale affecting everything that you touch in your daily life.
Right, big.
Jumping.
You're jumping. We're on the 19th floor, just for, please don't do that.
It's dangerous always to be, speak in terms of a lot of hyperbole, but all of these risks are actually real risks. And that's what's driving this level of investment in the technology. It's not to create the next Uber. It's to enable you to bring an adversary to their knees without ever having to fire a shot. And that is money well spent.
Speaking of money spent, the National Quantum Initiative, I'm going to give this to you actually, Amanda, is up for reauthorization with the Senate. What are you hearing since you are sitting so close to where all this is going on? And what is the level that we're looking for, and do you think it's enough?
Yeah, those are really great questions. Actually, maybe you are better to handle that.
So
you're giving me flashbacks from when I worked on Capitol Hill. But from my best understanding, and we talked about China spending $15 billion. To give you some perspective, the National Quantum Initiative Reauthorization Act is $1.9 billion is what they're talking about. So let that sink in. We're spending $1.9 billion, which Europe and the European Union in total have spent, and I don't quote me on this, I think it's about $5 billion, and that's what they've authorized so far. So in my opinion, it's quite low, and that the US could be doing more. My understanding, though, is that it will pass no problems because back in 2018, when the first National Quantum Initiative was signed by President Trump at the time, it passed kind of unanimously. So senators and representatives are very much aware about what's going on. However, just like all of you in the audience, they don't really know any more than you. So the fact that they now need to be educated, just like all of you are coming in here today and being educated about what's going on, is really going to be a big factor in how the money is going to be spent. So as of right now, a lot of the money goes through the Department of Energy and the National Institutes for Technologies and Standards. You've heard us say NIST. But there's also now looking at the DoD spending, and could DoD put more money towards this? And that's part of the conversation as well. But over time, I think America can't just live off of the fact that we are the innovation capital of the world, that America is going to have to put some more public money into what is going on with quantum.
So if we think of ourselves as innovation capital of the world, and Tom, I'm going to ask you this, do you think that we're living in a similar time to the semiconductor stage or AI, or, are we just in a completely different sort of matrix right now that people are unaware of where the rest of the world is?
Hillary, this is global, and this is every day. And the people at Holland and Knight, there's unbelievable people. Dan Sennett, Tom Davis are have their finger on exactly what you're talking about and working hard on behalf. They're wonderful. But honestly, you talked about jumping out of the building. Well, take your gold bars with you, I guess. So nobody steals them, because we're not headed that way though. But I see it that President Trump has a great opportunity to define the next 100 years of humanity. The moonshot that was unbelievable, but it was almost truthfully symbolic. I know it's important to us as humans and all that, but at the end of the day, it's almost symbolic. Oppenheimer at the University of Chicago and those places there, with that whole thing, was one situation. And that was, whoever knows what happened if the other side had gotten that technology. We're in a spot, Lamont, I think you said this, which is, this matters on a day-to-day basis. If you're in a back alley and somebody pulls a gun, if somebody big and you're much bigger and you pulls a gun on you, you're like, okay, I got a shot now. I just got to get the gun out of their hand and I can basically get out of this. That's the spot we're in right now, because a missile that's being fired across the world, if it gets turned around, it will hurt. So we need to win this thing. We need a bunch of government money put into it, and the lawyers. Again, I'm going to advertise for Holland and Knight, but the lawyers at Tom have a broader opinion, a broader understanding. Paul certainly does, than what I do. But I just know this: we're not putting enough money into it, because this will define the presidency of Donald Trump, and may define humanity for the next 100 years.
Let me add a point to what you were saying about funding too, because there has been legitimately some pushback about public funding on research and development and the limitations that are attached to that. I would make 2 points about it. One, and this won't be popular in some circles, but it is an incredibly inefficient use of capital for the National Quantum Initiative or others to spend all of that money in universities, in university settings and nonprofit research labs, because our co-founders, as with your co-founder, came out of the academic world. And one of the points they make is you spend all of that money training people who leave.
Right.
They're not staying, they're not employees. You're going to train them and they're going to leave. And then you're going to train the next folks and they're going to leave. And each group is going to make some incremental progress based on what was done before, but nowhere near as efficiently as someone whose job is to develop those quantum applications. It's just not that efficient. So as it turns out, much of NQI is not a particularly efficient use of capital. That's point one. Point two is and I'll just say with IonQ for example, we're a public company. We don't need to do a capital raise. We don't anticipate doing another capital raise. However, government sends an important signal by buying the technology. And that becomes, in military terms, a force multiplier. Because when the street sees that the government is buying our technology, we signed a deal with the Air Force Research Lab at the end of September. The week before that deal was signed, I think our stock was trading at about $7 a share. Today it's at about 31.
That's because of the announcement of Cubatech.
But it is a 5% pop in the last 30 days. So congratulations
Oh, yeah,
to you on that.
it's a massive.
Corey, you should be feeling good about that.
Yeah, thanks,
Yes,
Corey.
yes.
But part of that, no doubt, is due to the demand signal that the government sent to the street about the prospects for this technology. And you can't, we're never going to invest that level of money into this, but we can send some important signals that drive private capital to it. So anyway.
Yeah,
And
well, go ahead.
to add to that, our company is starting in academia. The commercialization doesn't happen in academia. The commercialization happens outside of academia in the startup companies. So that is where the private capital and even some other forms of public capital can come in and help advance the technology way more than anything in academia.
And
One
I
more
think
point
we've
about
talked.
That's why I don't work at a university anymore.
Well, I think you and I've talked about that gap between product and coming out of a clean room and having a product, but actually getting that to commercialization, which is where the private capital and people like Matt and myself and others, we need healthy competition in this space because we need more of that private capital in there to make an impact.
Competition is good.
It is.
It drives development. The other thing I would say about the university world, it's very important, right? The work that happens at places like Lincoln Labs and others, super important, not to take anything away from them. But here's a question for the audience. How many PhDs in quantum physics do US universities graduate every year that are US citizens and are going to stay here? Anyone? Out of 330 million Americans, how many do you think? On average, 48 people. 48 people that are US citizens. We graduate far, thousands. We graduate far more than that, but they're Chinese, they're Iranian, they're Russian, they're German. Some of the very best students in this field are Iranian and Chinese and Russian.
And our universities are educating them and they're going back.
And they're going back. That's correct.
So perhaps changing that immigration would be.
What about the citizens who stay?
So some become faculty members themselves because specifically American citizens who are really into this and going to get a PhD or not going to industry at certain points want to do research themselves and going into some of these national labs or. I heard a question about DARPA. Right?
I was curious as to DARPA's role in advancing this effort.
So you all may have a perspective on this. We've obviously worked with DARPA, and probably all of us have worked with DARPA. I have friends, who are doing really good work in quantum at DARPA. Here's the problem with it. It's going to take roughly $1 billion in investment to build a commercially viable quantum computer. And you are never going to get there with DARPA funding because it's peanut butter spread. That's point one. Peanut butter spread in the sense that you've got a good idea, you get a DARPA contract for $750K. You've got a great idea, you're going to apply and you're going to get an 18-month DARPA contract for $1.3 million. That's all good, but there are a couple issues with it. One, you can't use it to go fundraise because it doesn't mean much, right? It's a 12-month contract. The other is you can't use it to go hire people because you don't know if you're going to have a job for her at the end of the 12 months. Almost no DARPA funding moves to a phase 2, which is commercialization. Just rarely happens.
It gets canceled.
Yeah, it gets canceled. Like it's a purple unicorn to see a DARPA phase 2 funding.
Right.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
I just think they invented the internet. Maybe they could do it again.
I mean, the real problem is at a certain point, we're going to have to put some markers down on different technologies that we think are important. And they're going to have to be real markers, right? In the same way that I don't want to make an analogy to going to Vegas, but if you want to make money in Vegas and you think you're going to be really lucky, it won't happen at the 25-cent table. And with DARPA, my concern about this is we're taking, as we've said, not very much funding in the US government, and we're spreading it very, very thinly. So that we take, everyone's heard about the Valley of Death. We take these technologies, we fund them just enough to keep them alive, but not enough to commercialize them.
Got it.
Thanks
So
for that perspective.
we've got, I think, 2 quick questions, and then we've got to run out in our time. Yes?
Hi, just this is very new to me.
And this is Mayor Betty speaking.
Hi, Maggie Lakeworth
Yeah.
Beach.
Lakeworth Beach.
In terms of the ultimate application, is this going to be considered really for military and science and government and big business, or is there an idea that this will come down to like my PC? Are they two separate? Are they parallel, or is one going to is quantum?
I think if you look at quantum technology as a big thing and not just computing, networking, sensing, the answer is probably yes, because maybe one day in the future, just like how all of our iPhones are connected to some data center, there may be a quantum computer in a data center that will be crunching some data for you faster than what's happening today. So that's how you might benefit from it. Or there may be a quantum sensor that gets small enough that can be put into your iPhone. But will you own a quantum computer even in my 6-year-old lifetime? Probably not.
Mayor Betty, to your point, if I had come to you, one of the things about quantum that is so exciting is we don't really know the full universe of uses for it. And here's an example that our, to give him credit, our co-founder Jungsang Kim uses. If I had come to you and said, I'd like the city to invest $800,000 because I'm going to develop this new technology that you can call a taxi with and it'll take you wherever you want to go, you'd laugh me out of the room. But that became Uber. And that's a business worth billions of dollars. No one could have foreseen that. And if you had actually pitched it, no one would have funded it. Similar things are going to happen with this technology, but they're going to be bigger and broader.
I think there's one other question here, and then I want to wrap up with a single question for all of you.
So I want to go back to a quote that was stated. It indicated that if you're not first, you're last.
Yes.
So what characteristics have to exist to be first? Is it an operating independent system? It sounds like we already have operating independent systems. What are the characteristics that would define first?
I'll tell you what that checkered flag looks like to me. It's cracking Shor's algorithm. If you are the first to crack Shor's algorithm, you have won the race.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so in the interest of time, a real quick fire question. Let's leave this on a happy note. What excites you, as opposed to the fear factor that I feel right now, but what excites you about the technology, everything quantum related over the next, call it 2 to 4 years?
So from my perspective, being in the quantum sensing space, I think there are some things that are a little more near term than some of the applications within quantum computing or quantum networking. So within 2 to 4 years, I think we can advance material science using our quantum microscope that Matt mentioned before. And as semiconductors are getting more and more advanced, one of the things we're developing is a quantum tool to be able to do failure analysis on new new chiplets in the semiconductor space. And within 2 to 4 years, I definitely see that product helping that space.
Terrific. Lamont?
I'm super excited about the broader availability of quantum access through some of the things we were talking about with networking and so on. I happen to live in Florida. I'm a Florida resident. It's important to me that quantum not just reside in Washington and Silicon Valley, but that we have smart people all over the country who are working on it. And I get super charged up. We all want to do things that we think matter, right? That's what animates us in the morning. And the ability to work in this field with such great people, such smart people, it's a blessing.
Terrific.
I go back to the internet analogy. You know, we've got this world in front of us that will be quantum enabled. It's going to change everybody's lives. And it's, you know, while we've shown a little bit of the doom and gloom here, there's so many incredibly positive things that will happen that we have no idea what they are. You know, back to the Uber analogy, or just how the internet has changed us as a society. And I think that is a wonderful thing that we have to look forward to.
First of all, it's encouraging that there's a Ricky Bobby reference in our. So what encourages me is that I'm on Capitol Hill every other week. I spend 3 days in just talking to congressmen. And now, instead of me going in there and saying, hey, I went more porridge, I need more money for this. They're now calling and saying, teach us more, bring us more information. Their congressional leaders, even freshmen, are basically saying, I got to get in front of this. Can you come and brief me? And they really want to learn this stuff. And so that's really encouraging. I'll give you my 2 cents. 5 years ago, NVIDIA was the 200th largest company in the United States. Today, it's the biggest company in the world. Chips are going to drive it. I don't know how many chips will be in an IonQ unit or whatever, but it is now today the biggest company in the world. It's all about the chips and the innovation on that.
Yeah, there's also a couple of missing aspects of technology. If we have an ambient superconductor, it changes the entire.
It makes it irrelevant.
Space. If we have photonic computers, if we don't need to do intermatrix computations, and we don't need to do such big NVIDIA type machines, that really the problem is that we have too many followers.
One thing that's also interesting about the power consumption too, quantum sensors can help monitor power consumptions and make it more efficient. So there's quantum helping quantum.
Yeah. So I think we could probably all sit here for hours because this is, I mean, just amazing. But Tom and Corey and Lamont and Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I think it's unquestionable that this is an unstoppable force and we all do need to pay attention. So I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Hillary.
Thanks, Hillary.